Hello, welcome back tuning in to Gazoffice on another Bank Holiday Monday. So it's only a couple of weeks since we had the Easter Bank Holiday Monday, very late of course this year. Now we're up to May Day Bank Holiday Monday and we've got to do another historic video. So what I thought we'd do for this Bank Holiday Monday and also for the end of May Bank Holiday Monday, the late spring Bank Holiday Monday, is do like a two-part historic video. So we're going to look at 6 individual summers actually for these two parts, and part 1 is going to be looking at the summers of 84, 85 and 86, and then part 2 is going to be looking at the summers of 87, 88 and 89. As we go along, we'll become clear that there is a reason behind choosing those summers from where we start to where we finish. So the first part 1 video we're doing today is going to cover the summers of 1984, 1985 and 1986. Hope I managed to bring back a few memories for you on this Bank Holiday Monday. So we couldn't do these historic videos at Gazoffice without 2 elements, really. The first element is the historic archive of charts from wetcentral.de. They have historic charts going right way back to the 1st of January 1871 at Wetter Central. And then we also get a lot of information from Trevor Harley's personal weather website. I think what makes the historic videos work is really bringing together the charts with the information, and much of the information, as I say, does come from Trevor Harley's personal weather website. We bring it together, and I think that's what makes the historic videos work. In a lot of ways, I'm just a small cog in a much larger wheel, just like the narrator of the story, really. But to bring the story to you, it has to be the charts and the information, and we couldn't do it without wetcentral.de and Trevor Harley. You find links to both of those websites on the links page. You can while away many a happy hour at wetcentral.de's historic archive, and also with Trevor Harley's personal website on a Bank Holiday Monday while away many a happy hour. I certainly have done myself, so do check out those 2 websites. You can find a link to them on the links page. Obviously, it's going to be quite a long video because, I mean, we're looking at 3 summers here, so it's going to be quite a long one. If you can't watch it, it won't go, though. Don't worry, it will be kept at Gazoffice within the historic section. It'll be kept there sort of indefinitely, so you can come back and watch this whenever you would like. And just say enjoy the video, and thanks so much for tuning in on your May Day Bank Holiday Monday. So we're going to start off with the summer of 1984, first of all. Now, the first thing to say about the summer of 1984 is that it is actually a little bit of a, I think it's a little bit of a forgotten summer, really, in a lot of ways. The 1980s didn't have that many decent summers. It had 2 really good ones, 1983, and hopefully I'm not giving too much away, but the final summer from part 2 that we're going to do at the end of the month, 1989. Those were the 2 really hot summers of the 1980s. But it did also have one other really quite good summer, and that's 1984. And I think a lot of people tend to forget 1984 a little bit, probably because it's kind of put in the shade a bit by 1983. In a similar way that the summer of 1975 is a little bit forgotten because everybody remembers 1976, but 1975 was a very hot summer in its own right, and I think in a lot of ways 1984 is kind of in that, it's treated in that way, that it's a little bit forgotten because everybody remembers 1983, but 1984 did have its moments. So we're going to start off on the 1st of May, 1984. Now, we start off for the summer of 1984 really quite cool and unsettled. This month, May 1984, has a central temperature of just 9.9 degrees. You'll see why, because it's an unsettled month. Low pressure is often close to the country. And as we go through to the 6th, actually, we get a build of high pressure up towards Iceland and Greenland, which turns the winds into the north. That brings down some really quite cool air. Interestingly, this month is driest across Western Scotland and wettest in southeastern parts of England, which is quite unusual. 131 millimetres of rain recorded this month in Romsey in Hants. So it's a little bit of a topsy-turvy month in that the north and west is drier compared to the south and the east. This ridge here brings down some very cool air through the first week of May 1984. The wind is really in from the north. Now, as we go through to the 12th, we find a build of pressure starting to ridge through the country from a displaced Azores ridge in the middle of the Atlantic, sending a ridge up towards Scandinavia. That looks like it might be the start of something a bit more settled, but no, not really. Low pressure is quickly coming back through. And then it turns increasingly unsettling to the second half of the month, with some really quite wet weather indeed as we run up towards the bank holiday weekend. Bank holiday weekend of May 1984, but late spring bank holiday was 25th to the 28th of the month. It rained all over the bank holiday in the southeast. No sunshine was recorded in any of the 3 days, and temperatures were beneath 10 degrees Celsius. So it was a pretty atrocious bank holiday Monday, 1984, late spring bank holiday Monday, to say the least, from this area of low pressure. The winds, as I say, they're in from the north, so very cool air is coming down from the north, and we've got low pressure close to the southeast producing those copious amounts of rain as we're going through that bank holiday weekend of the late spring, late May bank holiday weekend. Out to the north and west, you notice the hot pressure is higher there, so that's the reason it's drier in the north and west. It's wettest down in the southeast. Can you believe that rainfall fell on 66 out of 72 hours in London throughout that late spring bank holiday weekend? I'm not sure what the totals clocked up as in the end, but there must have been some very, very high totals in the southeast indeed over that late spring bank holiday. That's how we end May 1984, with low pressure still lurking out to the west of us. So we go through to June 84, and it looks like we're unsettled. This month has a central temperature of 14.5, so it is a little bit nearer to average, actually a little bit milder than average, possibly. It's a mostly dry month, and it's fairly sunny in the east. So we find that we begin on an unsettled note. Certainly the month had an unsettled first week with quite a bit of thundery rain, courtesy of these areas of low pressure. So the pattern that we have in May really continues through the first week of June. However, by the 7th, we're beginning to find pressure building out to the north and west again. Low pressure starting to clear off to the east. And this build of pressure then begins to take over. There's the ridge from the Azores high started to extend up. That's always what you're looking for in summer, to get the Azores high sending a ridge out into the west of Europe. When that happens, we can start to pull up warmer air. So from the 12th onwards, this is the beginning of things starting to turn quite a bit warmer. High pressure takes over through to the middle part of June 1984, bringing quite a warm spell. That continues into the 18th as well. Temperatures up into the mid to upper 20s Celsius here, so just about reaching 80 Fahrenheit with this large ridge of high pressure up to the 19th. Now, the 20th begins to weaken that pressure. We start to bring a weather system down from the west and north. That's running into quite hot air. There was thunderstorms on the 20th of June 1984, courtesy of this trough moving down. As that clears away, we go to a cooler, fresher air mass from the west and northwest again. And as we work towards the end of the month, we're on quite a cool note, really. We've got high pressure out to the west, low pressure out to the east, and the wind is coming from a northwesterly type direction. That's how we end June 1984 on a distinctly cool but not overly wet note. There will be some showers, maybe thundery showers in the east. The west will be mostly dry, and as I say, it's fairly cool air mass that we're bringing down there. Into July 1984, this is a much warmer month now. We get a central temperature of 16.9. So far, it hasn't looked like a very good summer, but things are going to rapidly start improving now. July 1984 is a mostly dry, sunny and warm month. I say central temperature of 16.9, which is pretty decent by any standards. And it is notable, though, for its thunderstorms. So this area of high pressure that we have here on the 1st intensifies as we go through to the 4th. A big ridge taking over the pattern through the first week of July 1984 and starting to pump up some much warmer air from the south as well. This is our first proper sort of hot spell of weather taking place here, as going to be first, then on to the second week of July 1984. That ridge is moving into Central Europe on the 8th. We're pulling the air up from the south. That's quite hot air that is pushing up from the south, and we see temperatures lifting up on this day, 8th of July 1984, to 32 degrees, 90 Fahrenheit is recorded here at Heathrow. So a proper hot day, our first proper hot day of the summer. However, with low pressure out to the southwest, high pressure slipping away to the east, wind instability from the south, yes, we're going to get thunderstorms. And this day is quite notable, actually. The 9th of July 1984 sees violent thunderstorms breaking out across the country, and we see a lightning strike at York Minster, which severely damages York Minster. There was a massive fire there caused by that lightning. And Trevor Hardy notes that at the time there was some talk about this being a sign from God. So very violent thunderstorms break down that first hot spell on the 9th of July 1984. By the 10th, we're in a cooler, fresher air mass with this area of low pressure out to the west of the island, and then we go into a cool, fresh, rather showery situation, head up towards the middle part of the month. 15th of July sees that low pressure clearing away to the east. We start to build the ridge up from the west once again. Here comes another ridge across the country again, and it's what you look out for a decent summer. You want to see the Azores high ridging from the Azores and pushing ridges up into the west of Europe. So with this area of high pressure taking over, we're starting to warm things up once again through July 1984, and actually this day is quite infamous. On the 19th of July 1984, we have an earthquake measuring 5.4 on the Richter scale, centred across North Wales. But where I am in Northamptonshire, I actually felt that earthquake early in the morning of the 19th of July 1984. Myself, my brother used to have bunk beds, and I used to have the lower bunk. My brother had the top bunk, and the room started shaking, and we were both in bed. The room started shaking. It's about 7:30 in the morning. The room started shaking, and my brother told me off for jumping up and down on the lower bunk. But of course, actually, it wasn't me. I was innocent at that time, and it was an earthquake that was causing the room to shake, and that became apparent about an hour or so later when all the reports started coming in. 5.4 on the Richter scale is a pretty big earthquake, actually, so that's the reason that we felt it here in Northampton, albeit the quake itself was centred across North Wales. I'm not sure if it did too much damage. I would assume at 5.4 really it must have done. Anyway, we have high pressure taking us up to the 20th of July 1984. And that high pressure is continuing through the country, although on the 22nd we get 21 millimetres of rain in an hour in Maidenhead, and again on the 23rd we get 43 millimetres of rain in 50 minutes. So although we are under a ridge here, it's still a fairly unstable air mass. It was quite warm at this point, with temperatures into mid-20s Celsius. So we are getting scattered thunderstorms breaking out within this ridge. So it's not as dry, perhaps, as it would first appear. And the high pressure goes on through to the end of July, actually strengthening. So those scattered thundery showers, they sort of ease away in the second half of July, or at the end of July 1984, have quite a bit of dry weather there, taking us through to the latter stages of the month. By month's end, we're beginning to again weaken the pressure a bit, start to move in an area of low pressure from off the Atlantic. And then we go through to August 1984, which is really the peak of this summer. It has a central temperature of 17.6, so it's a pretty hot month actually, and pretty dry again. But there were thunderstorms that we had to contend with. Deborah Harley notes that at the time, he remembers everybody lounging around in the parks, sitting in the sun. I'm sure they were. We begin on quite an unsettled note, though, with low pressure centred over the top of the country, so it's quite an unsettled start to August 1984. But that quickly moves away, and then again we're building the ridge from the Azores High. That's the Azores High there. There's the ridge being sent over the top of the country. By the 10th of August 1984, we're back into a proper summer pattern. Temperatures are into the mid to 20 Celsius. Very warm, dry, and sunny, if not hot, for some parts of the country. We run up towards the middle part of the month. We're keeping that ridge close to the UK, maintaining a lot of dry weather. And then we start to get another heat wave going here as we get towards the 19th of August 1984. The air's pushing up from the south again. We've got high pressure over Germany, low pressure is out to west. A classic plume is beginning to move up from southern parts of Europe. That takes us into the 20th, where when I think get our highest temperature of the summer, actually, we record 32 degrees over 90 Fahrenheit in Jersey on the 20th, and even Prestwick, Scotland, gets up to 31.88 Fahrenheit. I think this is just about the hottest that we get it through this summer. Of course, it does pale into insignificance a little bit compared to 1983, because 1983, virtually every day in July of 1983 and into August got above 80 Fahrenheit, so it does pale into in comparison really to summer of 1983. You can see what's a bit of a forgotten summer, but even so, for what happened in the 1980s, which isn't remembered really for its summers, it was at the better end of the scale. There's the upper air temperatures for the 20th of August 1984, showing that it's a pretty hot day. Although, compared to modern standards, when we tend to get the 15, even 20 Celsius isotherm wafting into the UK, I don't suppose it was that over top. Now, inevitably, this heat wave is going to break down into thunderstorms again, so this high pressure begins to slip away on the 21st into 22nd. We've had violent thunderstorms pushing up from the south and the southwest with this area of low pressure. There's no real information on those thunderstorms, how much rain they gave, but we would have had prolonged outbreaks of rain, if not violent thunderstorms moving up from the south, breaking down that heat wave. As we run up to the end of August 1984, no real signs of autumn setting in yet. We've still got the Azores High sending up these ridges, keeping particularly southern parts of the country mainly dry. It is turning a little bit more unsettled up to the north. That's how we finish the summer of 1984 with low pressure up to the north, bringing some rain there. The south still close to that Azores Ridge, still pretty dry and warm. Now we go through to September, and we end the summer of 1984 on quite a cloudy and wet note. Actually, it's a very wet month. It has a central temperature of just 13.7, so really quite disappointing. And as I say, pretty wet month, particularly in the second half. So we get through to the 3rd of September 84, and yes, we are breaking down that ridge quite obviously. Really cool northerly wind pushing in on the 4th, with this active cold front bringing heavy rain through the country. Then we get a bit of a ridge, and it starts to settle down a little bit as we go through to the 7th, but it doesn't really last all that long. Low pressure's quickly coming back in on the 9th. Again, a real northerly push there on the 10th, round an area of low pressure in the North Sea. And then we start to build up in the second half of the month, around middle of the month, we start to build up a bit of a ridge across Scandinavia. That's trying to turn things drier. But again, it doesn't really come to much, and low pressure is coming back through, starting to get that distinct sort of autumnal type appearance to the chart as well. Certainly by the 24th, that looks pretty autumnal, and early onset of autumn really through 1984. So it was a pretty decent summer, but by September it was all breaking down into a very autumnal type pattern. Interestingly, that happened in 1983 as well. It was a hot summer, of course, but by September back into autumn. This day is quite interesting. 22nd of September 1984 has a minimum temperature of -3 at Aviemore. We go into the final week of September 1984 on an unsettled note. Low pressure coming in off the Atlantic, bringing outbreaks of rain, and that's how we end the story of the summer of 1984. So we skip on a year. Of course, we have a very cold winter then, 84-85, really cold winter, and I've covered that in historic videos already. Haven't seen it, do check out the historic archive. That's where you can find the link to the historic video of the winter of 1984-1985, which was really very cold and wintry indeed. So we go through to our next summer, which is the summer of 1985. And again, we're going to start off in May 1985, which has a central temperature of 10.9. So it's a little bit better compared to the May of 1984. But that said, it still isn't much to write home about. It's an unsettled, dull and wet month, especially so in the east, with heavy rain at times elsewhere also. There is thunder during this month. There was thunderstorms leading to lightning strikes, flooding and hail. This is how we begin the storyline of the summer of 1985, with low pressure out to our northwest, high pressure down to the southwest, trying to throw that ridge up, but we're in a cool northwesterly wind. We go through the first week of May 1985, looking distinctly unsettled, with low pressure very close to the country, and this continues up to the 10th. The first 10 days look cool and unsettled, low pressure in the North Sea, bringing the winds in from the north and the northeast. That looks very unsettled indeed. Through to the middle part of May 1985, yes, low pressure is still driving in off the Atlantic. How many have we got there? We've got 1, 2, 3 and 4 areas of low pressure in the Atlantic. That's a very unsettled pattern there through the middle part of the month. The 16th tries to build a little bit of a ridge up to the northeast, and that continues up to the 17th as well, but by the 21st that's actually gone up towards Greenland. It's gone in towards northern blocking, and we've got low pressure underneath it, keeping things pretty cool and unsettled. The wind is from the east or northeast, so temperatures aren't going to be very warm here. This area of low pressure will be bringing quite a bit of rain as well. We run up towards the end of May 1984, keeping things very, 85 I should say, keeping things very unsettled indeed, with low pressure again to the north of Scotland and out in the Atlantic too on the 25th of May, and into the 26th, really unsettled weather continues. We have the Dunmo hailstorm on this day, on the 26th of May 1985. It's particularly damaging, with the sky reported to turn green. Hailstones up to 65 millimetres fell, and nearly 32 millimetres of rain also fell out of thunderstorms in the middle part of the afternoon from this unstable southerly wind around these areas of low pressure. We go through to the end of the month and we get a little bit of a build of high pressure. That preludes what's going to try and happen later on in the summer. So we go through to the actual summer of 1985, 1st of June, and we are under a ridge of high pressure. Doesn't look too bad at all to be starting the summer, mostly dry and warm. However, very quickly things are going to start to go downhill once again. The summer of 1985 is remembered as a pretty dismal one, to be honest. Up to the 4th, and that high pressure again, look where it's going. It's going up to the north and the northwest, with low pressure down to the south once more. And then things by the 6th of June 1985 are turning increasingly unsettled here, with low pressure moving up from the south, bringing heavy outbreaks of rain. As those low pressures clear away, we find the winds turning to the north, and this northerly wind does bring snow, can you believe, on the 7th of June 1985 to northern parts of the country. I remember that. I was expecting we might get some wintry showers here in Northamptonshire. They didn't get as far downers here, but further north, yes, there was snow on the 7th of June 1985. Stays unsettled through into the middle part of the month. This month has a central temperature of 12.7, so it's a distinctly cold, wet and miserable affair. There's very wet, particularly wet in East Anglia, very wet in East Anglia. And by the later in the month, we find a 25mm tree at Oldham School in Hertfordshire being struck by lightning. I've not got a date for that. Trevor doesn't have a date for that event, but I think it was later in the month. I can vaguely, in the vague mists of time, kind of remember that. I think it was later in June 1985. So here on the 13th, looking distinctly poor with low pressure in the North Sea, high pressure out to west, and the wind is properly coming in from the north. Through to middle part of the month, we tried to get a little bit of a ridge going in the south. Notice this time the Azores High, it is there, it's where it should be, but it's not throwing up those ridges. Instead, the jet stream is just riding over the top, keeping these areas of low pressure coming in from the Atlantic. Look at that on the 21st. That would be not out of place in October. Deep area of low pressure out to the west of Ireland. Strong winds and heavy outbreaks of rain sweeping up across the country. Through to the 24th of June, no real changes. Stays very unsettled, and these unsettled conditions keep going to the end of the month. However, again, we are trying to build a little bit of a ridge down to the south, but overall still looks pretty cool, pretty unsettled as we're ending the first month of the summer of 1985. We go through to July, and this is the best month of the summer of 1985, actually. By modern standards, it's nothing to write home about, but it has a central temperature of 16.2, and there are some, not a huge amount of them, but there are some warm and sunny spells, particularly so in the south and the southeast. So we find through the first week, we get a ridge of high pressure building up from the southwest. That gives us a lot of dry and warm weather early on in July 1985. And this day, the 4th of July 1985, sees temperatures going up to 29 degrees in Southampton. 29 degrees is about 85 Fahrenheit. However, we've got a thundery low developing, a heat low pushing out of Spain, developing into a thundery low over the Bay of Biscay. So by the time we get through to the 5th and the 6th of July, we've broken down that little mini heat wave. That's gone very quickly. A couple of 5 days in a thunderstorm classic scenario. By the 6th of July 1985, we're back into a cooler, fresher westerly flow. Through into the second week of the month, a bit of a north-south split starts to set up. So you have high pressure trying to stem that ridge up from the Azores into the UK. It's mostly affecting the south because we've still got fairly cool and showery westerly winds up in the north. So a bit of a north-south split. This day, 13th of July, is one of our hottest days of the summer. I think it may actually be the hottest day of the summer, with the temperature going up to 30 degrees in Jersey. That's 86 in Fahrenheit. That's a very low maximum temperature, yearly maximum temperature. So it just goes to show you how cool actually this summer was. And even then, even with that heat in the far south, it's still unsettled up to the north with that low pressure bringing more showers. And very quickly again, that little mini heat wave is broken down in the south as this low pressure moves in from the west and the southwest. Looks like it's turning increasingly unsettled. Middle part of July 1985 is generally quite cool and showery with those westerly winds. And a deep area of low pressure is moving into the north and the west of the country. Look at that, looks really quite autumnal there on the 18th of July 1985. I'll just go back to the 13th because that day, as I say, reaches 30 degrees in Jersey. This is also Live Aid Day as well. Some of you may remember the event that took place on the 13th of July 1985 down in Wembley Stadium, raising money and awareness for the terrible drought and famine that occurred in, I think it's Ethiopia in 84, 85. So massive event took place on 13th of July 1985. I remember it as being a very warm and sunny day in London. I didn't go to it, but I watched it on the telly. I remember it as being a very warm and sunny day there. And I say it's probably just about the hottest day of the summer for southern parts of the country. So they did pick, certainly, they did pick the right day. Okay, let's get moving on and progressing on. So we go through to the 18th, looking distinctly autumnal with into that westerly, northwesterly pattern with that area of low pressure out to the north and west of Scotland. That's how we go into the 21st of July 1985. Now we're going to get another little mini plume going, so we start to get a ridge building up from the southwest once again, and that begins to push eastwards, bringing the air up from the south once more. So hotter air starts to push northwards. We get temperatures going up to 23 degrees, 29 degrees, I think that is. Need to put specs on. 29 degrees at London Heathrow on this day, 25th of July. 1985, but you see it's unstable. There's low pressure close to the country, so you would expect thunderstorms, and those thunderstorms did break out here on the 25th and 26th of July 1985. We have violent thunderstorms across Ireland with heavy rain and large hailstones. The rain affected southern and western Scotland too. Murrayfield and Edinburgh gets 94 millimetres of rain in 24 hours on the 25th of July 1985. But as I say, Heathrow reaches 29 degrees. The month overall was quite warm in the south and the southeast. That looks really quite friendly for all of us, but as I say, the heaviest of the rain tended to be in the north and the west. We go through to the end of July 1985. We're ending the month on a much more unsettled note now. We've got a trough centred over the top of the country as we end July 1985. Things are beginning to look just a little bit ominous, and indeed things were ominous, because as we go through to August 1985, we do so on a very unsettled note. So we've gone through there. Let's go through to there. That's where we should be. So we go through to August 1985 on a very unsettled note, with low pressure driving in from off the Atlantic. Look at that, very autumnal looking pattern setting up quickly through August 1985. This month has a centering temperature of just 14.0, so it really is an unusually cold and unsettled month. Trevor Harley describes it as generally cool, windy, unsettled, very wet for Scotland. The wettest summer of the century in Glasgow, and 345 millimetres of rain recorded, I think, this month in Estelmuir. So it looks really unsettled through this opening week of August 1985, and it certainly was. I was on holiday down in, I think it was in Torquay, through the early part of August 1985. I remember it being phenomenally wet. We go through to the 13th of August 85, and yes, we're still looking very autumnal, very unsettled. Trough of low pressure is parked almost across the country. Notice how far away from us the Azores high is now. It's unable to throw that ridge up across the country. We move through to the 14th, and we get quite an interesting situation. We get a gust of wind of 93 miles an hour on this day, caused by a downburst during a thunderstorm as cold air sinks to the ground. And this is recorded at Conisbee, Lincolnshire. So a very violent thunderstorm on this day with this area of low pressure causing a huge gust of wind. I'm not sure if that would be classified really as some sort of tornado type situation, but it must have been pretty frightening for anybody in Conisbee on the 14th of August 1985. I wonder if there's anybody watching that remembers that. So middle of the month, and it's really cool and unsettled. Look at that, it's about as bad as it gets, really, with that low pressure dominating the weather, and we get a have an attempt to pull up some warmer air from the south on the 18th of August, but doesn't really come to very much, and it's going to stay generally cool and very unsettled through into the final week or so of the month. Again, the Azores High is trying to get a bit of a ridge to the south of us, but really it's these areas of low pressure that are in control. 25th of August 1985 looks distinctly cool, unsettled and autumnal too. Now, right at the very end of the month, we are building the pressure up a little bit down in the south. The north and west still looks very unsettled. You can imagine why it was one of the wettest summer months, if not the wettest summer month on record for some northern and western parts of the country. But the south and the east, we're close to that ridge from the Azores. And that takes us into September, actually, which was a drier month. We start September 1985 on a very unsettled note still of this area of low pressure, but overall it's actually quite a warm and sunny month in September 1985, and interestingly it has a central temperature of 14.6, so it's actually warmer in September 1985 than it is in August 1985. That is something that you tend to find when you have very cool August. You do often, not always, but you do often find that the September after it will be warmer than the August that preceded it. Now, obviously, we had a very unsettled start to September 1985, but by the 7th, high pressure is beginning to develop down to the south, and that high pressure actually brings a little bit of a heat wave as we go through to the 10th and then on up to the 12th and the 13th. We find that we are bringing up some very warm air from the south, and we see temperatures going up to 27 degrees, 81 Fahrenheit on the 12th and the 13th with this late spell of hot weather. However, it's breaking down on the 13th into thundery conditions. And then as we move into the second half of the month, get a little bit of a north-south split, but still high pressure is close to the south, keeping southern parts largely dry, more unsettled up to the north and the west. We all turn a little bit more unsettled for a time around the equinox, but then high pressure's coming back again. Look at that. So after that dismal August and pretty poor June as well, we find September really does start to compensate, and by the 26th, yes, we're bringing high pressure back, we're drawing the air up from the south, so there's another spell of fine and warm weather as we end September 1985 I should say, and that high pressure is still there down to the south and the southeast on the final day of the month, and that carried on actually into October of 1985. There's a lot of dry and warm weather, particularly through the early part of October 1985. Of course, by the end of October into November 1985, we was bringing in bitterly cold air and snow from the east. So that's a really interesting autumn in 1985. And then finally, the last summer that we're going to look at for part one of our 1980s summers is the summer of 1986. Now, this month, what started with May 1986, has a central temperature of 11.1, and all I've got to go on, really, is that it's very wet in the northwest. So let's run through and see what happens. Well, again, the first week of May 1986 does look unsettled, with low pressure close to the country. That low pressure is down to the southwest on the 7th. There's outbreaks of rain spreading northwards and eastwards across the country too. Stays unsettled up to the middle part of the month of May 1986. And these unsettled conditions continue then into the second half of the month too. The south and southeast is close to a ridge, so it's probably always drier there, with the most unsettled conditions likely to be out to the north and to the west. Very unsettled pattern there on the 21st of May 1986, with low pressure driving in from off the Atlantic once again. So we've got to 25th of May 1986, and again we've got high pressure down to our south and southeast. Low pressure is out to the north and west, so more rain piling into the north and west. The southeast could be getting a reasonable amount of dry weather. That's how we end May 1986, with the Azores High displaced some further north than normal, which might herald some improvement as we go through to June, and indeed it did, because although the summer of 1986 is remembered as another very poor summer, and what's happening here is that we're starting off with a good summer, and then we're going to go through several poor summers, and then we're going to get to the final summer in part 2, 1989, and we're going to have another really good summer. In fact, a much better summer than anything that had gone before, back to 1983. So unsettled summers bookended with 2 decent summers is the idea of these 2 historic videos that we're doing this May. However, we do get a fairly decent June. So on the 3rd of June 1986, we've got a bit of a ridge extending up from the southwest, or trying to anyway. The 5th of June 86 has the winds in from the north, with low pressure in the North Sea, so that looks very cool and showery. Those conditions continue to the 7th and on up to the 9th. It's remaining unsettled. We get through to the 10th and then on to the 11th, and still no real sign that the weather is settling down, or is there? Well, actually, yes, look at this. By the 12th, we're beginning to get this ridge. Again, it's an extension from the Azores high, and by the 13th, there we go. We've got high pressure now building in across the country, and I think we get just about our best spell of weather of this summer early in the summer of 1986. So although we have a very cool start, it's wet and windy across many parts of the country, and even snow recorded in the Cairngorms on the 10th. By now, by the 14th, we're under a ridge of high pressure. It's looking much drier and much warmer indeed. And these dry and warm conditions take us through into the middle and then the second half of the month as well. A little bit more unsettled there on the 18th, but that doesn't last all that long, really. By the time we go through to 21st, look about high pressures back in again. Up to the north of the country. This low pressure probably threatening further storms through the Channel and from Channel Islands and the south, but most of the country is under this ridge. Lots of dry, fine and very warm conditions there. I remember this spell of weather quite well, actually. I was only, what would I have been in 1986, June 1986? I'd have been 8, nearly 9 years old, but I do remember this quite well. It's just day after day of really pleasant weather, because it wasn't overly hot. We didn't see the temperatures going much above 25 degrees here in Northants, I don't think. So it's just pleasantly warm, dry, sunny, low humidity, really nice spell of weather through June 1986. It did get a little bit hotter later on in the month, though. The position of the ridge changes a little bit. It's to the east, so it's drawing up a warmer air mass from the south. So it did turn quite hot right at the end of June 1986, and actually on the 27th, we have one of the warmest nights of the century, 27th of June 1986. In Exeter, we record a minimum of 22 degrees, so that was oppressively hot as we end the month. And you can see why that's happening, because we're drawing up the air much more from a southerly direction with this area of high pressure. So this is a little bit of a mini heat wave. I'm not sure what the maximum temperatures reached at this point. I assume they would have been at or maybe even above 30 degrees Celsius. It does look like really quite a hot spell as we're ending June 86. There's the minus, as the plus 15 Celsius isotherm there across the country, plus 20 Celsius isotherm, which don't see that often on these charts back in the 1980s. 20 Celsius isotherm there is across France. 15 Celsius isotherm is across the UK. So pretty warm as we end June 1986, and still with a lot of high pressure actually on the final day of the month. We get through to July 1986, and this month has a central temperature of 15.9, so it is warmer than that warm June. However, that is a fairly cool July. Actually, it's cooler than average. We start off still with a pattern left over from June 1986, still with that ridge there, still bringing up those warm temperatures from the south. But very quickly we find cooler air coming in from the Atlantic, and it starts to turn more unsettled. It's slightly cooler than average month. It has on the 9th has a record low of minus 2.5 in St. Harman in Powys. So that's interesting, because in June we have one of the warmest nights of the century, and then in July, just a couple of weeks later, get one of the coldest summer nights of the century. So quite interesting how that happened. Looks much more unsettled now on the 6th of July 86, doesn't it? Low pressure is close to the country, and then this is that night that delivered that unusually cold minimum temperature of minus 2.5, record low at St. Herman in Powys. Still trying to extend the ridge from the Azores high here on the 12th of July 1986. So a fair amount of dry weather still for the south. A little bit more unsettled probably from the north. And we go through to the second half of the month. It looks like it's turning more widely unsettled then, with low pressure pushing down from the north and west. Although the south still just about holding on to a reasonable amount of dry weather, but by the 24th of July 86 we're all into an unsettled pattern, and then that takes us through to the end of the month with the weather becoming increasingly unsettled. Look at that, by the final day of July 1986 we've got a trough parked over the top of the UK. And then what to say about August 1986, other than it was a very, very cool month. In fact, it has a central temperature of 13.7. I'll say it again, central temperature for August 1986 of 13.7. The coldest August since 1956, 40 years before, and distinctly unsettled as well. So we go through, actually it's 30 years before, wasn't it, 1956. So we go through these charts quite quickly, and they're going to be pretty grim indeed, with low pressure constantly sitting over the top of the country. 1005 millibar trough there on the 7th of August 86 looks really dismal indeed. I remember this month very, very well as being a really poor month. 15th of August 1986, again another trough is parked over the top of the country, bringing more copious amounts of rain with it too. We go through to the latter stages of the month. It stays unsettled. A little bit of a ridge trying to build there on the 21st, but look, low pressure is out to the west, and that just keeps those unsettled and very cool conditions going. Now we're running up to the bank holiday weekend of August 1986. Of course, that is very well remembered as being the bank holiday weekend that delivered us the remains of Hurricane Charlie. I've already done a historic video about Hurricane Charlie, so I won't go into too much detail, but just look at that. The 26th of August 1986 deliver us Hurricane Charlie, and what a storm that was. It brought torrential rain, it brought severe gale force winds, widespread flooding. 25 millimetres of rain was widespread from the 25th to the 26th of August. Over 50 millimetres of rain was recorded across Wales, the Midlands and Northern England. 135 millimetres of rain was recorded in Aber in North Wales, and there was extensive flooding and disruption. Many trees were brought down by the high winds and the torrential rain combined. It was unusually cold as well, and about torrential rain with temperatures of only 10 degrees Celsius. And before the rain arrived, actually, at Kinbrace in the Highlands, there was a minimum of minus 3.4. So really cold, really wet, and disruptive end to the summer of 1986 from the remains of Hurricane Charlie. Certainly one of the worst Augusts in recent times. As Hurricane Charlie gets out of the way, it leaves us with a very cool, cold even, north-northeast wind up to gale force, and that's how we end August 1986. With high pressure then starting to extend it across the country, but it's within cold air. And as we go through to September very quickly, what happens in September 1986 is that it's a very cold but a very dry month. In fact, it's the coldest September in recent times, with a central temperature of just 11.3. When you consider September 2006 was over 16 degrees, in September 2006. This September has a CET of just 11.3. Just goes to show you how cold it was. It was the third coldest of the century. There were frequent ground frost and even some air frost as well. So high pressure dominates the first day, but then it turns a little bit more unsettled from the north and the west. But high pressure is never too far away during this month, September 86, but it's always to the west, which means the wind is always coming down from the north. It's always distinctly unsettled. Actually, have a little bit of a drought going on here. A drought technically is defined as more than 14 days without measurable rain. However, the southern parts of the country were cold and wet from this area of low pressure riding underneath the block. So you can see what happens there on the 14th of September 1986. Low pressure is down to the south, high pressure out to the northwest. The winds are in from the north, so it's distinctly cool and mostly dry, but southern areas are a little bit wetter. We keep it very cool through into the middle part of the month as well. Again, the winds all the while coming from a northerly type direction. However, a bit of a change takes place from the 19th as the position of the high pressure starts to change. Still lots of dry weather, and still quite cold at night, I remember, but under this ridge by day, it did turn a little bit warmer. That's how we go through to the end of September 1986, with high pressure still continuing in the south, always turning a little bit more unsettled out to the north and the west as well. That's our final chart of this historic video, high pressure dominating the weather. So that's how the first three summers, 84, 85, 86, look. Starts off quite decent, then the next two were really poor. We're going to do part two at the end of the month. It'll be for the late spring bank holiday Monday, and that's going to cover the summers of 87, 88, 89, and we're going to do this in reverse. So the first two summers will be very poor, but then 1989 was a really good summer, possibly the best summer of the 1980s, although I think 1983 probably takes that crown. But it was a very good summer that we had in 1989, and we'll cover that in part two. I'm just going to leave you with some pictures and then sign out. So this is York Minster, the fire at York Minster in, I think it was the 9th of July 1984. After it had been struck by lightning. You see, it really was a blaze there. York Minster. That's another view of the fire that took place after that tremendous lightning strike. This is Live Aid from summer 1985, 13th of July 1985. Look at that, clear blue skies, lovely day down across London on the 13th of July 1985 for anybody that was at the Live Aid event. As I say, that's just about the best day of the summer of 1985, so they certainly got very, very lucky with the weather for that. This is Nebworth in 1986. I think this is August 1986. Looks pretty decent, but it wasn't long before Hurricane Charlie really washed things out. So this is from the end of August 1986, 25th, 26th, where we've got widespread flooding there. Not sure where that is, but a very flooded road from Hurricane Charlie. There's a flooded caravan park by the look of it. You wouldn't want to be stuck in that field. And again, I'm not sure where this will be, but it looks like it's a flooded, possibly a flooded racing ground somewhere. Again, that is from 1986 and the very memorable Hurricane Charlie. Right, I'm going to sign out now. Hope you enjoyed this part one of the summers of the 1980s. We'll have part two for you at the end of the month with the late spring bank holiday Monday. And at 54 minutes, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.